The last part of our study of management styles and skills is sort of looking at the relationship between them. So what we've learned is that managers use different skills, and maybe they have the same skills but use them differently. And we looked at these six: communication, delegation, planning, leading, decision making, and interpersonal. But then we also looked at there's different management styles. So we looked at autocratic, persuasive, consultative, participative, and laissez-faire. And what this topic is about is saying, well, based on what type of manager you are, that will affect how you communicate. So every manager has to use these skills. Maybe they're better at them than others or use more than other managers do. But how you use them will be affected by what management style you adopt. So take communication, for example. If you're an autocratic manager, that's going to be one way. Whereas if you're down this end, participative, laissez-faire, that's two way. If you're an autocratic or persuasive manager, you're not going to delegate at all. Whereas at the other end of the spectrum here with these styles, you're going to give out total or a very lot of delegation is going to be used. Planning, this will be very detailed under an autocratic or persuasive style and always be done by the manager. Whereas at the other end, it's very open-ended, very flexible, allowing the team to have a say and so on, and coming up with their own plans. Leading, well, autocratic and persuasive are about telling and selling, whereas laissez-faire is more about coaching and being hands-off or more of a mentor. And in decision making, at this end of the spectrum, an autocratic and persuasive manager makes all the decisions, whereas at the other end, employees make the decisions. And lastly, with interpersonal skills, it's very direct communication and interpersonal skills with autocratic and persuasive, whereas at the other end of the spectrum, it's more open communication, two-way communication, listening to people and being more empathetic because you've got more of a people focus, whereas at this end, you've got more of a task focus. So the interpersonal communication is very direct. So what this topic's about is saying, well, if we use different management styles, what are the skills we'll probably use more than others and how will we use them? So if we took autocratic and persuasive, which are very similar, so we can talk about them together. We could say a manager who uses this style with their communication, they're going to use one-way communication to issue instructions to be followed. So it's important they communicate clearly and effectively to give goals and targets that employees understand because they're going to have to follow those instructions. The planning they're going to use, well, the manager is responsible for all decision making and controlling the team's activities. So therefore, it's important that the manager is a really good planner. They need to not only plan their own time, but also the employee's time. And lastly, with decision making, if we're using an autocratic or persuasive style, the manager is going to make all the decisions. So they must be effective at making decisions from a range of possible alternatives. What about consultative and participative, which are again very similar? So we can talk about them in the same way. So with these two management styles, we could say the communication will involve the manager using both one-way and two-way communication. Not only does the manager need to provide instructions and guidance, but they also need to listen to input and feedback. So that's used quite differently than up here with autocratic and persuasive. Delegation. So this manager will use delegation. They'll give the team a lot of authority and control over their activities. So the manager needs to be really good at that skill. And lastly, leading. The team is given the authority to manage their tasks, so that must mean they're doing work sort of on their own without the manager's constant supervision. So the manager needs to be really good at leading. They need to guide each employee so they're clear on their task and their timeline. And also, if any conflicts do come about, they need to be able to resolve those. And lastly, if we were to use a laissez-faire style, well, the delegation, it's total delegation. So you're handing over, it's hands-off management. So you need to be really good at delegating and deciding what should be delegated to who and how they should be, monitoring and encouraging them as they progress on their work. The interpersonal skills are going to be really important here because the manager is more hands-off and providing guidance and support instead of monitoring. The manager must therefore be really good at focusing on managing relationships and caring and motivating to get the best out of the team. And lastly, the communication here, it's going to be two-way communication. There will be one-way communication at times, but mostly two-way. And what that's about is the manager will need to allow the team to work without constantly monitoring, so they need to show them trust. And that means that the manager needs to effectively use two-way communication so employees understand what they have to do because you're not monitoring them. It's very important you communicate what they need to do. But also as they're going about it, that the two-way communication bit means that the employees need to be able to ask questions and provide feedback as they go. And that's really, really important with laissez-faire. So with these management styles, we looked at three skills that management style will probably use more than others, but all the skills, the six skills we looked at, they could be applied to any management style. All managers under every style use them. It's just when we look at our case studies, we want to tailor it to the case study and say how that manager might use each skill.